Thank you all for what you do. And now please join me in welcoming the Prime Minister.
Thanks. Thank you. Well, Alex, thanks very much. Thank you, everyone, for the warm welcome. It's fantastic to be here. Oh, let me start with an apology, though, because apparently you thought the King was coming this morning. So, anyway, the next best thing, I hope. But it's nice for me to be joined by some of my colleagues from Parliament. I've got Ben, Caroline and Rob, who's local, but hopefully many of you know them as your local MPs. Nice to have them here as well. Now, I was going to be super brief and just tell you a little bit about my reflections on having had this job for a year. It's always been a year since I've been your Prime Minister, and then take some questions from you. So look, when I first got this job, as you can remember, things were not that easy, and probably to put it mildly, but I set out for all of you very clear 5 simple things that I wanted to achieve for all of you, and that was to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists, and to stop the boats. 5 priorities, 5 simple things that you could hold me accountable for, 5 things that I knew were your priorities everywhere I went. Those were the things that people said to me that you need to focus on. And I'm pleased that we've been making progress on all of them. So inflation is now coming down, easing the burden on the cost of living for all of you. We now know that our economy actually had one of the fastest recoveries out of the pandemic of any European country, so that's good news. Debt is falling as we wanted it to, which is good for the financial security for the country's future. And when it comes to waiting lists, obviously things are tough with the strikes, but we have seen improvements with the longest waiters having been eliminated, huge improvement in ambulance and A&E waiting times, and we're hiring more doctors and nurses than ever before. And when it comes to the boats tackling illegal migration, for the first time ever, the numbers are down. So this year, the number of people coming here is down by 1/5, thanks to all the different things that we've been working on, particularly with Rob, who's the Immigration Minister. So look, that's good and it's welcome, but I know it's not enough. I know it's not enough. I know that all of you in the country wants more change, that you're hungry for change. I, like you, want to change the direction of the country. And my view is, in order to do that, we've just got to do things differently. Politics has got to be different. Your Prime Minister, I have got to be different. We've got to make decisions in a different way. Because my reflection is, for too long, politicians made decisions focused on the short term, not the long term. Took the easy way out rather than doing what's right for the long term of our country. And I'm determined to be different. I'm determined to change how we do things, because unless we do that, we won't be able to change our country for the better, and that's what we all want to see. Over the last few weeks, I've set out a range of different ways that we're going to start doing that. You might remember a few weeks ago I set out a new approach to net zero. Now, of course we believe in net zero, of course we're going to deliver it, but we've got to do that in a more proportionate, pragmatic way that recognises the costs on all of you, on your families. And I don't want you to have to face bills of £5,000, £10,000, £15,000 to rip out boilers prematurely, change your car when that's not necessary in the time frames that were scheduled. So I said, look, we're going to do things differently. Now, I got a lot of flack for that, but I think that's the right thing for you, your families, and our country. The next thing is towns. Like many of you, more people in our country live in towns than live in our bigger cities. But too often, Westminster politicians focus just what's happening on the big cities. They forget about our fantastic towns up and down the country. So last week, we announced £1 billion for 55 towns across the UK, including Newark here, Mansfield, putting local people, putting you in charge of that money so that you can spend it on your priorities over the next several years. Long-term funding so you can have better high streets, protect your civic buildings, safer communities. And that is this government recognising the importance of towns as integral to our way of life and giving you the tools and the funding you need to bring that change. And then at conference last week, I set out 3 big decisions, 3 big long-term decisions that I really think will change our country for the better. The first was on HS2. And look, I inherited this project, I took a fresh look at it, and I concluded that it wasn't the right thing to carry on with it beyond Birmingham. £36 billion was meant to be spent on this thing going forward. Twice as much as was originally forecast when it was greenlit. And since then, we've had a pandemic, which has changed how we all travel. So with a fresh look, I said we can do something different. We can do something better with that money. So we're going to take every penny of that £36 billion and we're going to spend it on transport across the country. on bus, on road, on rail, on all the forms of transport that you use every day. And we're going to deliver it far quicker so that you can see the benefits faster, and we're going to see it across more parts of our country. And I think that is the right thing to do for the long term. Now, look, again, not an easy decision, and as you can see, people have criticised me for it, but I'm always going to do what I think is right for all of you, and I think that is the right way to spend £36 billion rather than what was currently slated. The next thing was something for our kids, smoking. Smoking is the single biggest cause of death, of disability, of ill health in our country. Kills 64,000 people a year. It's a leading cause of strokes, heart disease, diabetes, asthma, and it's only something that all of us grapple with in our families, and I thought we could do something about that. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise the smoking age by 1 year every year so that an entire generation of children can grow up without being able to legally buy cigarettes. Now, that is a big thing, but I think it's the right thing to do. Now, it wasn't an easy decision because I generally believe in making sure everyone can choose how they want to live their lives. But smoking is different, highly addictive, and, crucially, if I asked all of you in here who have kids or have grandkids, and I said, do you want your kids to grow up smoking, even if you smoke, I bet you the answer to that question is no. Of course I don't want my kids to grow up smoking. And I had a chance to try and make that a reality, and we're going to take it and do something that will be incredible for our country, but also incredible for our NHS, because smoking is the #1 cause of pressure on the NHS. So in the long term, if we want to ease that, then if we do something about smoking, we're going to have a stronger NHS and save our country about £17 billion a year, because that's what smoking costs the country and the NHS and our economy. And then the last big decision was on education. Now, I got into politics because I think education is the most important thing that any politician can do to create a better future. Education is how we can spread opportunity around, make sure that people can move along in life, fulfill all their dreams. And I took a look at our education system and said there's some things we can do differently, particularly between 16 and 18. Most importantly, we don't have parity of esteem between technical and academic education. We treat them separately. Now, the thing is, if you treat things separately, they're never going to be equal. And we have a chance to change that. So what we're going to do is we're going to have one qualification at 18, a new one. Instead of A-levels, T-levels, BTECs and all of this, we're going to have one qualification, the new Advanced British Standard, that everyone is going to sit. And it's going to combine the best of all those things. We're going to make sure our kids spend more time in the classroom, because if you look around the world, our kids aren't studying as much as everyone else, so we're going to put more time, more money in to get them in the classroom more. And we're going to broaden the range of subjects that they learn. Because right now, a quarter of our children, 40% of our most disadvantaged children, leave school without having the basics of maths and English under their belt. And look, we are not setting them up for success in life if we're sending them out into the world without them having got the basics right, the basics of maths, the basics of English. You all know, and especially here in a technical job, unless you've got those skills, you can't get on in life. And I want no child to be left behind in the future that we're building. So look, that's a big long-term reform that will take time to get right, but in the here and now, we're going to put more money in to get more teachers, particularly into our FE colleges, which again, Westminster politicians haven't always focused on FE colleges, haven't always given them the attention they need, and we're going to fix that. So look, those are some big decisions. Net zero, money and tools for towns, HS2, a generation of children growing up without smoking, and big reforms to our education system. That's what I'm about. I'm about bringing that change, because I want your children, your grandchildren, to have a better future. That's why I'm doing this job, and I'm going to give it day and night, everything I've got, to make sure you feel that change is coming and that your kids' lives are going to be better than yours. So thank you very much for having me here today. It's been a great pleasure seeing some of you walking around. And I'll just finish on this. It's visits like this that inspire me. Right? Seeing what you all are doing, seeing how hard you're working, seeing the new skills that you're acquiring to build a better life for yourselves, and in the process doing something wonderful for millions of people around the country, saving them money on their electronics, saving our environment, and doing it with a smile on your face. That is inspiring, and I want to harness that and spread it across the country. If we can get that right, then we're well on our way to a brighter future. Thanks very much. OK, right, now, the floor is yours. Don't be shy, apart from the fact that your boss is sitting right here. But ask away. So, who's got questions? Yes.
Hi,
Miss.
you mentioned it briefly. But what do you plan to do to improve the road and rail in Newark and East Midlands?
Yeah, perfect. So the question was about what we're going to do to improve road and rail in the East Midlands. So look, there's a document online. You should talk to Ben Bradley, who's going to be superb down the line as your mayoral candidate. We're going to do lots, is the simple reality. Every penny that we were going to spend on HS2 is going to stay in your region, first of all. That's the first thing you should know. And we're going to spend it on every form of transportation. So in a few weeks' time, bus fares were meant to go up to £2.50. As a result of this decision, they're going to stay at £2. And they're going to stay at £2 for a while. We're able to do that because of this decision. Now, I'm not sure how all of you get to work, but across the country, buses are the most popular form of public transportation, and it's right that we focus on it. For roads, we're going to spend more money improving road maintenance and potholes than we've ever done. So that's what this decision will allow us to do. Right? Instead of all this money being gobbled up by one big rail project, we're able to spend improving our roads across the country here in the West Midlands with billions of pounds, actually. That's how significant it is. Now, when you have a new mayor, we want to put them in control. That's what happens in London. Right? Sadiq Khan or whoever the Labour mayor is down there, whoever the mayor was previously, they get given money by the government to spend on their priorities. And we want to do the same here. So the new mayor for the East Midlands is going to have over £1.5 billion to spend on all your priorities. And the point is, it shouldn't be me making those decisions about which tram you guys want, where you think it should go, how you should improve bus routes. That should be all of you making those decisions, and your mayor will be able to make those decisions with more money than any other region in the rest of the country, which I think is fantastic. We're also accelerating 10 different roads across the East Midlands, which I can't list all the top of my head, but Ben may have them. The A5 from Hinckley to Tamworth, which is a really important freight corridor and transport link, is going to be improved. And then on rail, we're doing a couple of really exciting things. We're doing something called the Midlands Rail Hub. We're going to spend £1.75 billion connecting up 40 or 50 stations across the Midlands, all the way from Cheltenham over to the East Midlands via Birmingham, which is going to mean across all those stations, including Leicester, Birmingham, Nottingham, you're going to have more services, more frequent journeys, more capacity, and that's going to be fantastic. And then the Newark to Nottingham line is going to be also upgraded across the entire piece, which means the journey times between, I'll get this right, I think between here and Leeds are going to get cut by an hour, to give you a sense of the scale. And across all these big cities, you're going to see big improvements. So look, as your point was, what are you doing across the board? Across the board, road, rail, and buses, we're investing more, but in the forms of transport that you guys all use all the time. And I think, as I said, that is a better way to spend that money. And we're already sitting down with your local representatives to make sure that the planning is going ahead, so all that money gets put out and you guys start seeing the benefit as soon as possible. Good. Right, who's next? Sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Prime Minister. You already mentioned you've had a lot of personal challenges about the net zero UK targets. Obviously, we see a lot of negative news about climate change and temperature increases. Do you think that you've had to water down your policy in any way?
So look, on this net zero, the most important thing for everyone to know is that we've stuck to all our targets. Because I know the media would like to say we're watering down things. We're not watering down anything. We have world-leading targets. You guys should all be very proud. We've decarbonised faster than any other major country. Fact. Our targets for 2030 are more ambitious than any other country. Fact. More so than America, Europe, Japan, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, you name it, right? So we've done more than everyone else. We're going to do more than anyone else. Nothing has changed about that. But I went through the plans in detail and realised that we could do that in a more pragmatic, proportionate and realistic way. Because what was slated to happen was lots of policies that would involve many of you spending £5,000, £10,000, £15,000 to install really expensive upgrades in your home, to rip out boilers, to change your car before any of that was necessary. And I didn't think that was right. I didn't think it was right. I think, look, we all believe in net zero, but we shouldn't be ideological about it. We should be cognizant of the cost on all of you and your families, particularly right now. And so that's what we've done. I said, look, we're not going to do all of those things. We're going to change the approach to how we get there. Destination is the same. We're still going to hit those targets. They're still better than anyone else's. And by the way, we only account for 1% of the world's emissions in the first place. But we're still going to do all of that. We're just going to do it in a more sensible way that saves all of you money. Now, look, in this debate, there are people who are incredibly ideological about it, which is why I got all the criticism, why everyone said to me, you're watering down things and you don't care about the planet. Of course I do. I have 2 young girls. Of course I care about the environment that we leave behind, right? That's what we all care about. But I think we also care about doing it in a sensible way that brings people with us and doesn't bankrupt the country in the process. Like, that's my approach, and I think that is a sensible approach that I think would command the support of most of you in this room. Right, let's go over here. Who's got next one? Yes, sir.
My name's Sammy Almond. I'm the Vice Chairperson of WID, which is Wellbeing, Inclusion and Diversity within this repair centre. I've worked quite closely with the local authorities in this area, but I'm finding quite a lot of barriers with other counties, other places to bring services on site to help us. My question to you is what is the government going to do to support well-being, mental health, things like that within the workplace?
Oh, it's a great question, Sammy. Thank you for everything you do, because it's really important. Now, 'cause I'm sure Alex would agree, right? You know, a happy workforce is a more productive workforce, right? We all want to live fulfilling lives, and making sure that we have good mental health is a part of that. Now, what I can tell you, look, at what government is doing is making sure that in the NHS we have proper focus on mental health, right? If you think back a decade ago, did we all give mental health the attention it deserves? Probably not, right? And that has massively changed. So every year, the percentage of the NHS budget that is spent on mental health services is going up and up. And the other thing we're doing is making sure that that is pushed out into the community. It's not just what's happening at hospitals, it's what are the services that are available in the community for people to get access to. So new things like talking therapies, where people can get access on the phone to counselling support, is a great example of that. And the other thing I'd flag for those of you who have children or grandchildren is what we're doing in schools. Because I think all of us have seen, post the pandemic, the impact or rising impact of mental health issues on young people, particularly young girls, and that's really concerning to me. So we're making sure that every school is given a grant so that they can train a mental health lead, so that someone in the school is trained to spot the signs, to make sure they can provide support to young people, and then we can start making a difference. And we're making good progress, and by the end of this Parliament, I think we would have got to every single school across the country who will have that person trained. So look, that is what we need to do. And of course, look, where there are ways for us to work with employers to improve the interaction of those things, we'll do that. But thanks for what you do, because it will make a huge difference, not just to people in this room, but to everyone who works here too. Thank you. Right, who's next? We've got anyone over here? Yes, sir.
So for the first time in my adult life, rent has been cheaper than a mortgage, and I'm trying to save up for a mortgage. I'm struggling to do both now. It's having to pay for rent now. So what does my future look like in terms of housing?
Yeah. No, look, it's really special. Right? There will be many of us in this room who own our own homes, and we'll remember what that feels like, right? It is a very special feeling getting the keys to your own home, your first home, and I want to make sure everyone gets to experience what that feels like, right? You get your home, you build a family there, it's a very special part of your life. And interestingly, your story is not uncommon, right? Right now, there are lots of people, I'm sure many of you in this room, who can afford your rent. In fact, your mortgage payment would be less than your rent payment, but getting on the housing ladder is tough. And that's why we focused on exactly that bit. So what we now have are 95% mortgages. Because the issue for you is the deposit, right? You could, if you had the mortgage, you could pay for the mortgage. It's the deposit that is the tricky bit, saving up enough money for a deposit. So what we've done is provide a government guarantee to the banks so that they can provide 95% mortgages, which massively shrink the deposit that is required from you, and that is helping people to get on the housing ladder, because then they can afford their monthly mortgage payment, like their rent, and they haven't had to wait several years to save up the much larger deposit. The other thing we're doing is something called the Help to Buy ISA, or there's now a lifetime ISA. So when you save, for every £3 that you save, the government will chip in £1. if you're using that towards a deposit. So go and have a look at that online, and that can help with thousands of extra pounds. So if you've got a partner and both of you are saving, both of you can benefit from that. And after a few years, it could be that the government has come alongside you to the tune of thousands of pounds, and you can use that money specifically for a deposit to then go buy your house. I just was with someone actually just the other day who was telling me how they'd used that to get their first home, and it made a difference. And I'm not sure as many people know about that policy as they should. So go and have a look it up. It's called the Help to Buy or Lifetime ISA. And so when you put in £3, government puts in £1, and that money can go to a deposit for your home as well. But I'd say the last thing is, look, the most important thing I'd need to do for you and everyone else here who either owns their home or wants to is make sure we get a lid on inflation. Right? That is not an abstract thing. It's not an economic term that I'm obsessed with when I go on about it, because it's inflation that is making the bank put up interest rates, right? Which is putting up the cost of your mortgage. So we need to get inflation under control. We need to get inflation coming back down as it now is in order to ease the pressure on mortgage rates and interest rates. That's really important. And it's not easy. So a lot of the times when you see me saying, I'm sorry, I can't do that, or we can't spend money on that, or we shouldn't borrow to do that, it's because I want to get inflation down. And if we spend too much money, if we borrow too much money as a government, inflation will stay high, it will get worse, and interest rates will go up. That's not going to be good for any of you, even if it makes my life easier for a day or a week when I get to say yes to something nice, right? But that's what leadership is about, right? That's what being your Prime Minister is about. It's making those difficult decisions, which even though makes my life a bit tough in the short term, is the right long-term thing for all of you. Because I want interest rates to come back down as quickly as possible. I want inflation to come back down as quickly as possible, because that is the best way to help all of you in your bank accounts and in your wallets. All right. Yes, Miss.
Hi, Rishi. I'm just wondering what you've been most impressed with during your visit here today.
Ah, gosh. Right. You know, well, first of all, I am appalling with my hands at fixing anything. So first of all, like, the technical skill that you guys have is incredible. You know, the thing that really impressed me, though, is, look, I haven't seen a million of you, but all of the people I was chatting to, disproportionately, you've all been here for quite a long time. I thought that was nice. But what was really impressive was so many of the people I've met this morning started at one level in this company, and then over a time, they've acquired new skills and grown their careers, and they're earning more, they're doing different jobs, and I think that's incredible, right? And that is what I was talking about at the beginning, that I want my government to be on the side of you and people like that, right? People like you who are working hard and prepared to work hard because you want to build a better life for yourselves and your families. I think that's really special. That's what my parents were like. That's how I was raised, right? And for people who are doing that, my view is I've got to be right behind them. I've got to be in their corner helping them with everything that we do. And I've met lots of you who feel like that this morning. And that, as I said, is really inspiring, right? And to see that journey that so many of you had where you started here at an entry-level job, and then here we are 7, 8, 10 years later running an entire group, managing people, doubling what you've earned. I mean, that's incredible, right? That is a really impressive story. And I guess the other thing I'd say is, what's great about what you do is it has so much impact on the country. You are saving millions of people a fortune, right? When you extend the life of their laptop, their TV, or allow them to buy something refurbished, all of that is just putting cash in their pockets, right? It is at a time when cost of living is an issue. Like, you are saving people hundreds of pounds in their family budgets. That's incredibly special, right? And at the same time, you're doing something wonderful for the environment, because you're able to find every little bit of these big electronic devices and reuse them and put them back into circulation. So great for the environment, great for people's wallets, but also your personal stories are inspiring. So look, that's been, while it's been great to be here, and it's been a real pleasure to spend a bit of time with you all. So thank you for having me. Right, okay. Yes, sir.
Morning, Prime Minister. My question's broken down into two parts, really.
Right.
Why should we vote Conservative? And more importantly, with the mess left by your predecessor, why should we vote for you?
Look, right, it's a good one to end on before we get on to the media. Right. So, yeah, I think the first thing I'd say is we've all collectively got to look to the future, right? I could spend a lot of my time talking about the past and what happened and, whatever I inherited and all the rest of it, which I touched on, right? But that doesn't help any of you, right? Like, what we need to figure out is, like, what's the right thing for our country going forward? And that's what I'm looking forward to. And this, my simple answer to your question is that, right? That I know all of you want to see change, right? A change in the direction of our country, right? A feeling that things need to work better, that your kids' future will be better, right? I want to see that too. I am hungry to deliver that change for you. But I've got to tell you, right, that change is just not a function of which party is in power. That change is a function of the leadership that person offers. Are they willing to do things differently? Are they willing to change how politics is done? And that's what I'm about, right? So the reason to vote for me, the reason to support me is because I'm going to deliver that change for you, because I'm going to do things differently, because I'm not going to focus on the short-term thing, the easy way out. And you talked about my predecessors. You saw that last year, right? I spent most of my summer saying to all of you, saying to everyone in my party, something that they didn't really want to hear. But I thought that was the right thing for the country. I stuck to my guns, and now I'm standing here as your Prime Minister. So that's a sense of who I am, right? You saw me in COVID, right? None of you probably knew who I was when I popped up on your TV screen and started talking about this furlough thing, right? That had never been done before in our country. In fact, everyone told me at the time, was like, you must be joking. Of course we can't do something like that, right? But there were 10 million people who faced losing their jobs. I was not prepared to let that happen. So we made it work, and we protected 10 million jobs and helped our country recover. And you saw it the other week at conference, right? You saw me taking big decisions. I'm willing to take flack, right? I'm willing for people to criticise me. That's okay, because I believe that what I'm doing is right. Whether it's this approach to net zero, whether it's changing direction on HS2, whether it's ushering in a smoke-free generation for our kids, whether it's reforming our education system. None of these are easy things, right? But they're all the right things for the country. And I want you to sense that, you know what? This guy is really trying to change things. He is willing to do things differently. He's different to the other lot. He's different to the people who have come before. And I want change, and he can deliver it. So look, that's the simple message from me to all of you. And that's why I'm here talking to all of you, so I can hear what's on your mind and tell you what I'm about. But you've asked exactly the right question, and hopefully that's a decent answer for you. Thanks very much. Right, we better take some questions from the media before we go. So I've got a list here. Hang on, let's start with Sky. Where are we? Right, yes.
Hello, Rob Powell, Sky News. Thank you, Prime Minister. If I might ask about developments in the Middle East. The US is sending warships closer to Israel. Are there any plans being conceived for the UK to follow suit? And just very, very quickly, Labour's obviously meeting at its conference at the moment. They're talking about growth and building. Given that one of the main takeaways from your conference was cancelling plans, do you think Labour's now the party of business?
Right, so on Middle East, look, many of you will have seen what's happened over the past 36 hours in Israel, and the scenes are truly, truly horrifying. And as I said yesterday, this is not a time for equivocation. Right? We should just be straightforward in what's happening here, and that's that Hamas and the people that support Hamas are fully responsible for appalling acts of terrorism. We should call it out for what it is. Citizens of Israel are being murdered. Innocent people have been kidnapped, including children. Obviously, that's shocking and it's horrifying, and they should be held accountable for that. And what I've said to the Israeli Prime Minister is that we will provide all the support that they need to make sure that Israel can defend itself against these kinds of attacks. Now, we already have a very long-standing relationship with Israel. We're one of their strongest allies. We've provided in the past the kinds of equipment that they've used to defend themselves over the past couple of days. And as I said to the Prime Minister, we will continue to provide, whether that's diplomatic, intelligence or security support as they need. I'm chairing a COBRA of my ministerial colleagues this afternoon when we'll continue to discuss the situation, but we're in close dialogue with our Israeli counterparts, and I know all of you will join me in wanting to stand steadfast with the people of Israel at this very difficult time for them. And look, with regard to Labour and all the rest of it, look, I'm generally not particularly bothered about commenting on their stuff, but you asked a specific question about building. Now, we had a great question before about how do we get people to own their own homes. So just a few weeks ago, actually, we tried to pass a law in Parliament that would unlock 100,000 homes across our country that are currently being blocked from being built because of a very old EU law that's been very oddly interpreted, which everyone agrees is defective. And we tried to pass a law so that we could stop following that and unlock all these 100,000 homes, get people like you the home that you need to move into. And it would have been a great thing, right? And those homes could have been starting building quickly. Some of them are already built and they just can't be sold. But the Labour Party blocked it, right? In a piece of kind of cynical opportunism. They blocked it in the House of Lords as well, right? Not even in the House of Commons. So, look, they can say all the things they want, but actually action is what counts, right? And we were about to take action, as I said, to get 100,000 homes built around our country, and we weren't able to do so because of the Labour Party in the House of Lords, right? Like, so those are the facts. Like, I think, look, of course, everyone wants people to have a home to live in, but you've got to be willing to do some difficult things to make sure that that happens. You know, we were, and it was the Labour Party that blocked us. Next, can I go to LBC?
Morning, Prime Minister. Luke Shanahan, good to see you. You've talked about HS2, and I was just wondering if I could ask you about something the Transport Secretary has been talking about, the possibility that people who've had homes and land bought up for that northern leg, which has now been scrapped, possibly buying that property back. Do you have any more information on that for us, and what sympathy do you have for those people who've lived through a decade of uncertainty and still aren't quite sure where they stand now?
Yeah. Look, I know it's been very disruptive for lots of people along the routes or proposed routes, but one of the advantages of the decision that we've now made is that a process can start where people who have had their land purchased from them potentially will have the opportunity to buy it back. So there's a legal process that needs to be worked through with the Transport Secretaries on it. And the other thing, which Ben will be familiar with, is lots of people had what are called safeguarding provisions placed on their land, on properties and homes that were along the potential route in the future, and they couldn't do very much. So there's also now a process underway to see how we can remove some of those safeguards so those people can have that anxiety removed and have that certainty returned. So that we're getting on with all of those things. Those are some extra benefits that will come as a result of this decision. It's also similarly worth bearing in mind that there were lots of communities, including many in the East Midlands, who would have seen worse service to London as a result of HS2 being built, because their services will either have been slower or would have been reduced. And that won't happen now, actually, and there's a bunch of communities in the East Midlands for who can look forward knowing that they're not going to be cut out in that way, as well as all the positive stuff that we're going to be able to do in the East Midlands. So look, those are all good, positive things that are going to come out of the decision. Next, Bauer.
Morning, Maddie. Hi there.
Hi.
We know that inflation is obviously one of your huge priorities, but a lot of people that we've been speaking to feel that they just can't wait anymore. Our top story this morning is a quarter of people in the East Midlands are living in hygiene poverty. Councils across the region are having to increase the price of school meals. Some places by almost £1 a day. People telling us that that's just not affordable. Is it time to stop banging the inflation drum and kind of offer something else?
No, the number one priority facing families across the country is the cost of living, which is why it's important that my first priority is to halve inflation, because it is precisely inflation that is making the prices of everything that you buy higher, inflation that's eating into your savings, that's making people feel poorer. It's inflation that's pushing up interest rates and putting pressure on people's mortgages. Inflation is the cause of all of that, which is why actually precisely it's right that inflation is our number one priority to bring down. And I'm pleased that the plans that we've put in place are working. The last few months, you can really see inflation is starting to come down much more sharply now, which is good. And I know things are still difficult for lots of people, as you highlighted, which is why we're continuing to provide support this winter for the most vulnerable. Pensioners, for example, will receive extra money alongside their winter fuel payment. For those people who are most vulnerable are receiving £900 of extra support over the course of this year. But the best long-term way to help people to ease those pressures with the cost of living is to bring inflation down. So we've got to stick to the plans. That requires me and the government making difficult but the right long-term decisions for the country. And if we do that and we get inflation back down, people will start to see the benefits in their bank accounts. I'm confident of that. Next, ITV.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Peter Bean, ITV News Central. Prime Minister, at the last election here in the East Midlands, your party won 6 seats from Labour in the so-called red wall areas. The fact that you're here today in Newark making an address during the Labour Party conference itself, a very unusual step. Is that a sign of desperation that you're worried that voters here in the East Midlands are going to desert you at the next election?
No, I think, you know what, that kind of approach to everything is just incredibly political. I'm here because this is an incredible business filled with incredible people doing something that makes an enormous difference to the country, and an opportunity for me to come and see you all, hear from you, and also say thank you to everything that you're doing. But also, I'm here to talk about the plans that we announced. Right. I mean, just over the past few weeks, I was going over, we've announced some pretty big things that are going to impact all of you, whether that's on net zero, on HS2, on support for towns like Mansfield, like Newark. And I wanted to come here to the East Midlands to talk about it and the impact of those decisions on people, to explain why I think they're the right thing for the people here in the East Midlands, and to hear from them. And I think that's the right thing to do in this job, right? I think all of you would expect me to be out and about talking to you about what we're doing and make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable to all of you for delivering for it, right? That's what I'm here doing. I've also got fantastic parliamentary colleagues with me who do an incredible job for their communities, and particularly when it comes to the investment we're putting in towns across the East Midlands, in Newark, Mansfield. It's important that local people are put in charge of that funding, and they're going to get £20 million each in these towns. Local people are going to be in charge of how to spend that over the long term, and it's important that we get that right. And I want people to know that, you know, this government understands the particular needs of towns and the communities that they are and the people that live in them, and I'm here to explain how we're going to try and make a difference. All right, and then lastly, the Telegraph.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Can you confirm if any British citizens have been killed in Israel, and if so, how many? And are any British citizens believed to have been taken hostage by Hamas as well? And also on a related subject, do you now support prescribing the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is backed by the Home Office?
So on British citizens, I know it will be an anxious time for many families who have loved ones in the region. It's a quite complex situation on the ground, so we are working very closely with our Israeli counterparts to establish the status of any British nationals that are on the ground. That work is underway as we speak. But for anyone who does have family or friends in the region, the most important thing for them to do is follow the Foreign Office advice, but also the advice of the Israeli Home Command on the ground in particular areas. And if you're at all concerned, contact the Foreign Office, who have established procedures to make sure that they can be in touch with people and provide support to them as required. And with regard to Iran, I'm not going to speculate on the origins of all of this. You know, there'll be time for that in due course. But I've said previously that Iran and its actions poses a real threat to the security and safety of all of you, the British people, and that's why we've already taken quite strong action against the Iranian regime, not least sanctioning over 300 people, including the IRGC in its entirety. We passed a new law in Parliament, the National Security Act, which gives us more powers to disrupt the interference from foreign hostile states here in the UK to keep you all safe. And with regard to prescription, it's not something that routinely governments have ever commented on. But I can remind you that Hamas, who's claimed responsibility for the attacks in Israel, is a prescribed terrorist organisation under UK law. And it's Hamas who is responsible for what's happened over the past few days, and we will stand steadfast with Israel in supporting them to defend themselves against these appalling acts of terrorism. And lastly, it just remains for me to say an enormous thank you to all of you. Alex, thanks for having me. Thank you to all for your fantastic questions, but most importantly, thank you for everything you do. It makes a great difference to our country. It's been a real treat for me to spend some time with you this morning. I've certainly got a lot out of it, so I hope you have too, and hopefully I'll get to come back and see you soon in the future. Thanks very much.